You voluntarily leave Downing Street or the White House and give the keys to somebody who is a bitter opponent. China has never transferred power peacefully. Russia has never done so. In the democratic West, these norms are hard won, but my fear is they can unravel. And what we're seeing in America, it isn't just Trump. It's a broader sense in which very significant numbers of voters are willing to see these deeply important, precious institutional and cultural norms, to put less emphasis on that than having their person in office. That is a classic sign. Saw it in ancient Rome. Classics during the move from the Republic to the Empire. It's a classic sign of a civilization in disarray.
Now, in the studio here with me now, Matthew Syed, the author and Times columnist. Welcome, Matthew.
Well, lovely to be here. First time I think I've been on the show in the studio.
It's an honour. Debut appearance, Matthew. It's lovely to have you here. Let me ask you, I'm keen to get your thoughts. What do you make of this story?
Well, it would be almost comical if it wasn't so serious. It's part of an ongoing soap operatic dimension to American politics, which reflects a deep, trenchant polarization in the most important liberal democracy in the world. This is very serious, not just for America, but for the wider world, at a very acute moment of tension geopolitically, with war in the Middle East, in Europe, and the possible flashpoint in Taiwan. I mean, this couldn't be more serious for the future of the world. On the legal issue, a couple of things strike me. Yes, of course, judges should interpret the law impartially. Of course, there is a sense in which some of the judiciary has been politicized in America. It does have that dimension. But the political issue is that if Trump is excluded, it seems to be not impossible that other Republican candidates will follow Vivek Ramaswamy and decline to participate in the Republican primaries on the basis that somebody has been unfairly excluded from the race. If Nikki Haley and Chris Christie and Ron DeSantis follow that lead, then you could potentially have a scenario where Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee and Republicans, most of the front-running Republicans, have walked away. It seems to me that this is a nation, I think the probability of civil war is still significantly lower than 50%. But this makes the probability of it happening slightly higher than it was 48 hours ago.
Yeah, I mean, what the other Republican runners, who at the moment seem to be, effectively out of the race. I mean, they're so far behind Donald Trump in the favour of the electorate for the nominee for the Republican Party. They're absolutely out of sight, and we'll see how that plays out when the reactions come in. Ramaswamy has said he will not run in Colorado. Well, he will not. Haven't heard from anyone else.
No, not yet.
Some of the others, like Christie, Governor Christie, he's in a different camp. He's not sworn to Donald Trump. That's
true. And Ramaswamy, his whole campaign has been really endorsing Trump, accepting his argument that the vote was stolen from him. And so it is possible. I think Chris Christie and Nikki Haley have been, and Ron DeSantis a bit more belatedly, have been highly critical of Trump. Mitch McConnell in the Senate has described Trump as effectively as a racist. They have an ongoing dispute. But the wider question here, I think, is really worth deconstructing because, I mentioned it already, the world is in frantic geopolitical motion. There's a vote coming up on the UN over Israel. Saudi Arabia is facing both ways. India is effectively playing both sides. The non-aligned world has not yet picked a side, and China, Iran, North Korea and Russia are ever more coherent as a geopolitical axis. And to the extent that America looks weak, vulnerable, the number of liberal democracies increased in a great sweep after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It has been declining for almost 20 years. And to the extent that America seems like a dysfunctional, failing society, despite the fact that it grew at 2.5% economically this year, it's a political dysfunction that has so many ramifications for every part of a world during this period of energy transition which makes the entire system very vulnerable.
Well, I mean, you get a sense then in London, in capitals around Europe, there's a genuine deep degree of worry about the possibility of an America led by Donald Trump taking a much more isolationist approach to NATO, to international institutions everywhere. It would change the political balance of the world, the relationship with the West, with Russia, for example, and with China, and it bears a great deal of thinking about. You don't hear a lot of it discussed by leaders in public. Your reflection on, though, just standing back for a moment and look at the just extraordinary nature of the story we're discussing and the context of that story. Every day we see Donald Trump and the language that he's using being held up by opponents and applauded by supporters, calling opponents vermin in one speech, calling immigrants people who poison the blood of our country. The Biden White House are now almost daily drawing comparisons with the rhetoric of Mussolini and Hitler. This is, for want of any other word, just so deeply depressing, bordering on despairing.
I think we sometimes forget how difficult it has been for human societies to internalize norms, like, for example, the rule of law. Our species has been around for 250,000 years. It only really became robust. Impartial judges interpreting the law in a fair way based on evidence by, say, the 16th century. The peaceful transfer of power is a miracle when you think about it. You wish to continue to be in office, you have control over the military, and you voluntarily leave Downing Street or the White House and give the keys to somebody who is a bitter opponent. China has never transferred power peacefully. Russia has never done so. In the democratic West, these norms are hard won, but my fear is they can unravel. And what we're seeing in America, it isn't just Trump. It's a broader sense in which very significant numbers of voters are willing to see these deeply important, precious institutional and cultural norms, to put less emphasis on that than having their person in office. That is a classic sign. Saw it in ancient Rome. Classics during the move from the Republic to the Empire. It's a classic sign of a civilization in disarray.
So interesting, Matthew. And you hear conversations now where democracy itself is described as a relatively recent, very fragile experiment. And it's an experiment which can go wrong. There's no God-given right for democracy to win the day. Last word from you briefly, Matthew?
Yeah, I do say that I agree with what was just said, that in a sense, if he's going to be convicted of the charge of insurrection, he should be offered the chance to give his side of the story and for the judgment to be made via due process. And I do wonder whether we'll get to that. But the bigger picture for me, I very much hope... I mean, America's a society of 330 million people. And you're right, it is incredible that the two candidates, Trump and Biden, it seems to me, are inadequate to represent a nation with more Nobel Prize winners than most of the rest of the world put together, some of the most impressive corporate executives, brilliant academics, thinkers and scholars. What on earth? That's another symptom of the decay.
Yeah, it's a thought that takes your breath away, if we had any breath left
None left
to be taken away. Matthew Syed, lovely to see you. I do drop by any time, Matthew.
Thank you.